Well, hello to old teachers and current students. My name is Antonsson. I was class of 2011, which feels like a very long time ago, but also like really not at all. Just kind of wild to be back here at all. Campus has changed a lot. So basically, a bit about me and where I'm at right now in my career. I currently work at the Hammer Museum at UCLA. It's the contemporary art museum owned and run by UCLA. We're a free museum, which is a really interesting, arena to be working in, because I've been working in museums for a while now. And I'm the digital communications manager, so I get to do all the super fun social media stuff, as well as our email campaigns and a lot of work on our website, all of which is constantly changing and super fun and really engaging and lets me be creative in really unexpected and strange ways. So a little bit about my path to how I got here, and this is just our Instagram, just so you can see some of what we're up to. I had a really strange path to get here. None of it was by any means traditional. And I think when I was looking at colleges, when I was a senior at Poly, all that I knew was that I wanted to be an English major. That was pretty much the only thing I had, knocked out. And I got into Vassar College, and I studied English there. I studied a little bit of art history because I was interested in it. And actually, I don't know if any of you have had Ms. Hepp as a substitute teacher, but she was an English teacher when I was here, and she had offered in her English class like a very small unit of art history. And that kind of sparked everything for me because I had always loved museums, I had always loved art, and having a chance to finally dive into it was really exciting. So I continued doing that at Vassar, even though I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just enjoyed art, I enjoyed art history. I figured I might as well just add it to what I was already studying. And again, the only thing I knew for sure was that I wanted to be an English major and I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know in what capacity, so I just ran with it. And after 2 years at Vassar, I actually transferred to Penn. Vassar just wasn't a very good social fit for me, though the academics were incredible. So I transferred to Penn. I was in Philadelphia for 2 years. And when I was there, this is when things really started rolling. When I was there, I sort of decided I was interested in journalism, which was not something I had ever been interested in before. I wrote like one article for the Campus Alt Weekly. I went to like a group love concert or something and wrote up a review of the show, and I had so much fun doing it that I was like, ooh, I think I want to do more of this. Like I think I want to do more music journalism. And I just so happened at my part-time job to meet a girl who was from Philadelphia. She was not a Penn student, who wrote for a music publication in Philly. And she was like, just send in a sample to our editor-in-chief and we'll get you on the staff and yada, yada, yada. So I was a full-fledged music journalist in Philadelphia somehow, which didn't make any sense regarding anything that I had planned up till then and anything that I had future plans for. So I was doing that for a while, and I was convinced that was what I wanted to do. I was like, I'm gonna go work for Rolling Stone. Like I'm gonna be, it's gonna be like an Almost Famous situation. It's gonna be amazing. What was interesting about my college experience was while I was striving toward that, and this was, I think, I don't know if this was a mistake that I made or if this speaks to it's fine to not have a plan, but I didn't take a single internship when I was in college. I did like a very quick one at Pasadena City Hall for a while, but like other than that, like all the kids in my classes were always like desperate to get their summer internships because that was what was going to mold their career, and I just didn't do that. I didn't have any interest in it, which everything worked out fine, but that was one thing that I wasn't focused on, and everything kind of worked its way out because I was working. I was a music journalist, I was doing all of that, and the downside was by the time it came to graduation, I couldn't find a job. And so I moved home And a family friend had encouraged me to apply to the journalism program at USC. Grad school wasn't something that I ever really had plans for, but I figured, if I can't find a job, I'll do this as a backup plan. It'll be a good way to get more experience, a good way to learn a little bit more about what I want to get out of journalism, what I want to do, what direction to take, how to network, and all of that. And I got in, much to my surprise, and I was in the arts journalism program at USC, which was a year-long program devoted to arts journalism. So, arts writing, arts reviews. We met with a lot of journalists from, the LA Times, LA Weekly, the LA Review of Books. So it was a great experience for meeting people, and it really clarified that I didn't want to be a journalist at all. I was lucky enough in that program that part of it was you could do kind of like a fellowship with a local arts institution. So the head of our program was very, very well connected. And she was like, I know people at, the LA Phil, I know people at LACMA, I know people at Huntington, like I can get you a position with any of them, if there's anything you want to do with them. So I jumped at the chance, and I ended up doing like a journalism fellowship at LACMA while I was in grad school. So I was responsible for being something like an in-house journalist, which was a really weird position, and nobody really knew what that meant, myself included. And I essentially would find stories within the museum that interested me and write about them for the museum blog, which was a dream come true. I got to talk to like everyone under this guise of like, oh, I'm the in-house journalist. Like it was remarkable. And through doing that fellowship, I was like, you know what? I think this is what I want to do. Like I want to work in museum communications because it combines, my lifelong passion of art and art history with the skills I'm gaining in journalism school with like a subject matter that I'm like obsessed with. So this all kind of works. And through that, I told my boss at LACMA, I was like, if you have an opening, like I'd love to stay. And she was like, we don't, but we will pass job openings at other places to you as they come in, which was super helpful. And it was really important to be open with them about that and be like, I want to work here. I understand it's nonprofit, money's tight, there's probably no position, but I want to get into this world. I already had a foot in the door, which was really helpful, and I already had connections from working at LACMA, and who I still talk to all the time, and actually got me the job that I have now. So a job opening came up at the Art Institute of Chicago in their communications department. It was a really low, it was just like a tiny like copy editor job in the communications department. It was part-time, but I figured, it's the Art Institute of Chicago. It's the second greatest museum in America. I have to take it, I can't not. So I moved to Chicago, I worked in that job for a year and a half, and gained a lot of really good experience. I ended up leaving because it was part-time, they weren't gonna hire me full-time, I needed health insurance, I needed a job. So there was an opening down the lakeshore at, weirdly, the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago, which I was really nervous about taking because I knew nothing about fish at all, like nothing. And, but it was in social media, and it was a good position, it was a good role, and a friend of mine who knew people at the Shedd Aquarium said, this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for you to learn. So I was there for 2 years. It was the weirdest job I've ever had, but I loved it and I learned so much. I was pretty much in full control of our social media after a while. After my boss stepped down, I just got kind of like thrust into the role. And God, I learned so much there, and it was so valuable, I think, to be pushed outside of my comfort zone that, again, I knew nothing about fish, and I really had to rely on the skills that I had to push through that kind of nervousness around the content. Like, that knowledge around, like, what a parrotfish does would come, I would figure out the names of the 5 otters that we had. Like, that would all happen, but I really had to rely on the fact that I knew what I was doing. It was just that I didn't know what I was talking about. So, that'll come. And so I was there for 2 years, and I guess everything that is about to follow happened very fast. And around May, one of my old mentors from LACMA, from when I had that fellowship, who's no longer at LACMA, she reached out to me and said, hey, there are 5 major museums hiring for social media right now. You should just apply, see what happens. And I ended up applying to a couple of them. I applied to LACMA again, I applied to the Met, and I applied to the Hammer. Which I had never been to the Hammer. And you know, I had never been to Shed Aquarium before I applied to Shed Aquarium, which was kind of it was a strange thing to be in that interview and having to kind of like gauge what they wanted to tell me about the organization versus what I knew about it, and that was a really interesting experience. But so I happened to be home in June and got a message from yet another person I had worked with at LACMA, Scott, who was the head of communications at the Hammer. And I had no idea that he worked there. And he sent me an email and said, hey, you applied to the job. And I was like, I did. And he asked if I wanted to just chat on the phone informally. And I was like, you know, I'm actually in town. He was like, cool, come in tomorrow. And I had come home for vacation not planning to be interviewing at all for a job. So all I had were vacation clothes. I didn't prep. I just had like nothing. So I show up and I interviewed with them, and I was so impressed by their mission and everything that they stand for and everything that they do, that I was like, you know what? It's an incredible role. It's an incredible museum. And just based on what they've told me about themselves, I feel like I could be really, really happy here. So I took the job, and then at the end of July, I moved back to LA. And I've been here, 4 months now, which feels, again, like so much time, but not enough time at all. And it's been incredible. I basically, again, I run the social media, so all of these posts I posted and I wrote, and people, like our video team produced things like our videos, but the thing that's so incredible that ties everything together is that at the end of the day, the most important skill for what I do is writing. So, I always wanted to be a writer. This is always what I wanted to be doing, and I get to do it now. But if I had had this goal, if I had had this end goal in mind of, I really want to be a museum social media manager, which is such a wild job, I never would have known where to even begin. I would have thought like, oh, maybe I need to do like curatorial studies or museum studies or like more art history or anything like that. But the way that I got here was so winding and weird. And like, again, I'm writing all day. I'm using all the skills I learned in journalism school, even though I didn't want to be a journalist. I'm using all of that every single day, which is kind of bonkers because I could never have predicted that all of that would stitch together so nicely into this role that I have now. And that kind of catches up to today, I guess. That's the full story. I do want to show you just one thing. So this is just kind of the main Hammer Museum Instagram account. We rely on the accounts to really push our brand out into the world and push our ideas and give just like a really strong visual identity of who we are. And then I also want to show you, just because this is really fun, I want to show you the one post I had that ever went viral. Oh no!
No internet.
Darn. Well, the viral post might have to wait. But
Jill to the rescue.
And going viral is one of the most exhausting things that ever happened to me, I'm not gonna lie. Because I woke up the next morning and there were like 2,000 notifications to go through, and it was like that for about a week, which was insane. So this is when I was at the aquarium, and we had this video of one of our otters, Yaku, he's our oldest otter, pulling clams out of his pocket, because otters have pockets. They have these like extra loose armpits that they put things in, and I had wanted to share this for a really long time. I think I wrote this copy in like 3 minutes. And just posted it up, never expected it to go viral, but 2 million views. And that's basically, that hasn't grown much since it went up, so that was all within the first like 3 days of it being up. So this is the weird stuff you get to do if you're a social media manager. It's a delight, and you learn a lot. and it's incredible. And you work with all sorts of different departments, and it's just like the coolest job for like a very curious person. So I love it. Yeah, that's about all I got. Do you guys have any questions?
Like, as a social media manager, what does like your day-to-day work look like when you go?
It's never the same, but I would say on average, my morning starts with the really boring stuff of checking our feeds to see if like anybody has asked any questions or has posted anything really cool, and just kind of interacting with our audience. And that's the first thing I do in the morning, just to keep an eye on like everything that's happening, everything everyone's talking about. So I do that, and then normally the rest of the day is spent figuring out, what I'm going to post for the day or what I'm going to post for the next day, what the copy's going to look like, what photos I'm going to use, whether I can use the photos, because sometimes, especially with art, there are weird like rights issues that like you can't post a certain thing because the estate doesn't, so that gets messy. But also planning the schedule for the week and or month, so really looking forward and seeing like how are all the pieces going to fit together. So there's a lot of strategy involved too, and that I am doing daily, and just keeping an eye on like how things are performing. Like I did this post I did last week that I tried this new method, like did that do well? So those are kind of like the bare bones things that have to happen in the day. Every time. Those are kind of like just the standard things that happen in the day. But for the most part, it's like, I don't know, sometimes someone will have some crazy idea for something we have to do on social, and I'll have to go talk to the curator, like, can we do this? Can we get this artist on board? Blah, blah, blah. I'm in the middle of working on an Instagram takeover with one of our artists, which is going to be the weirdest thing I've done to date. So it's constantly changing, which I love. And it's also constantly changing because social media is always changing. Like, Facebook completely changed their rules for like advertising last week, and that's a new thing I have to deal with. So I love that it's a puzzle that constantly needs to be solved. Like there's never an end point where you're like, I succeeded, I've won social media. Like there's no way. So yeah, the day-to-day is really different and really weird every single day. Yeah.
Do you, I think of museums as being kind of traditional institutions. Do you ever find yourself in the position of having to defend your job? Somebody comes and says, social media, that's not the right thing, is it?
Really good question that I have a lot of big thoughts on. I'm really fortunate that the Hammer totally understands the value of social media, but it is a weird job. And it's like, oh, you do the hashtags, that's cute. Like, oh, you run a Facebook account, I could do that. You couldn't, I'm telling you. It's a really complicated, really nuanced job, and one of the most important things about it is, and the reason that I keep coming back to saying, like, this is vital for, like, museums or any brand or anything, but I think especially nonprofits, that when people are interested in what you do, or if they're curious about what you do, if you want to know more about the Hammer Museum, pretty much the first place you're going to go is social media. That's kind of the front door of the organization. It's where people are going to say, like, okay, how do they interact with people? Like, what's their voice? Like, are they playful? Are they buttoned up? Like, are they serious? Or do they take more risks? So it's kind of the first impression. And there's so much value in that you can't even really quantify. People have tried, but I personally think that it's just something that a brand has to inherently know, like, that's where all the conversations are happening. And if we're not a part of it, we're going to fall behind and we're going to get lost. So I am fortunate that I don't have to do a whole lot of justifying. I feel like my boss and my boss's boss do a lot of that for me, which is wonderful. But yeah, it is definitely a thing that people are just like, I don't see the point of this. Like, why do we need a Snapchat account? Things like that. But it matters. It really matters. And having something as part of your brand that is open and accessible, and people can ask some questions, people can be curious, people can get an idea of what you're about, and people can approach art, which is inherently intimidating. They can approach art in a manner that's safe and comfortable and exploratory. I mean, to me, there's so much value in that. So I will fight that fight for as long as I'm in this career path.
see that people interact with the most at the Hammer?
Ooh, so at the aquarium it was otters. It was always otters. But I'm actually learning that at the Hammer because we have a permanent collection, a fraction of it is on display. So we don't really have greatest hits except for this guy. So this is actually an artist who Mishap taught me about. So John Singer Sargent has a really dear place in my heart. But this was something that people were like so excited to see on social that I realized that I hadn't posted since I started. It's one of our most famous paintings, and I think people just get really attached to artworks, and it's kind of validating to see a museum posting it just for the love of it rather than trying to promote anything in particular. So it tends to be that kind of content that people respond to the most and are really excited to see and ask the most questions about. Because a lot of what we do is we're promoting our exhibitions because we have rotating exhibitions like every 3 months, and it's a lot to keep up with. But when you take this moment to kind of breathe with a work, people really, really, really respond to it, and that's always a really lovely thing. I love this painting. It's massive too. It's like probably 6 feet tall. Yeah, he's really large.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.